Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking. What's up, guys? Welcome back to a very important episode of the One Broke Actress podcast, an honest account of actor life plus a few lessons I learned in the process. I am your host, Sam Valentine, and I am so excited to bring you today's very quickly thrown together, last minute, amazing people podcast episode. I'm talking with Kevin West and Charlie Bodin, who were on the SAG Negotiating Committee, and they are going to tell us how the sausage is made. They're taking us step by step through what this process looked like, how we got to this tentative agreement, how we initially broke for strike, why we came back to the table, how the AMPTP dealt with our back and forth deals. And we hit on all the elephants in the room. We're going to talk about why it takes so long to get a full contract out to people. We're talking about the use of AI and how it ended up in the contract, how it did, and the future of it in coming contracts, including the commercials contract, which is something I hadn't thought about. I'm not going to tell you how to vote in this podcast. I'm telling you how I'm voting in this podcast. But I also want you to hear from actors who were in the room shouldering the responsibility of our future with them this whole time, giving up time with their families, their lives, their potential jobs to make a deal for us. I think this deal came out and we've all read the deal points and you can feel any way about it you so choose. But I think hearing the insight from the people who helped make that deal, from the actors who are not only helping make the decisions that got here, but also are affected by that deal because our contract is also their contract. We are all one and the same. And no matter how you feel, I really hope you listen to this podcast with full open hearts and minds to what Charlie and Kevin are going to present to us today. So without further ado, please enjoy Kevin West and Charlie Bodin from the SAG Negotiating Committee. Do me a favor and both identify your voices. I will have done an intro before this, but go ahead and give me a little so everyone knows who is talking. So Kevin, do you want to go first?
I will. This is Kevin E. West, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And Charlie?
I'm Charlie Bodin, and Kevin E. West made me be. Oh, just kidding. I'll do it. I'll do it nice. I'll be nice.
No, I loved that.
No, I'm Charlie Bodin, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Well, I know where he lives, Sam, so he just had any choice.
I mean, he's in his car right now, so we can find him regardless. This is going to be a little bit different of an episode, guys, because we are getting this out ASAP because I don't know if you guys have heard, but we're voting on a contract. There's a lot going on right now in SAG, and Kevin and Charlie were both a part of the negotiating committee. And I thought it would be very prudent for everyone to hear from people who were on the inside of this negotiation instead of getting information from Instagram comment sections. So let's talk about first. I would love to know, Kevin, why are you on the negotiating committee? How did you end up in that room? How did most of those members end up in that room?
I will try to do this briefly, Sam. It's not my first negotiation. I've done this before, and that's partly how I wind up in it. However, just because you have been part of any negotiation contract, be it commercial or this one, TV theatrical, there is still a seating process that happens from the top of our union on down, and that starts with Fran and can work its way to the first national vice president, be it Jody Long or the secretary treasurer, Jolie Fisher. And they do their best they can to diversify the committee from across the country and various mids and small locals, plus New York and Los Angeles. And we try to also diversify with experts in different areas. And to be honest with you, being someone who's not 25 and who happens to be a Caucasian male, I would probably say that it is my previous experience and also my career that probably helped keep me in this room on this particular negotiation, which I'm actually really happy about. But that's how that process can go.
Okay, great. And ending up in the negotiating committee, are you guys voted on? I forget how that works.
No, we're not voting on in terms of being in the committee. It's kind of an internal conversation among some of the senior negotiators and some of the senior leadership from Fran on down, as I mentioned. And because we do happen to have two groups in the union, there's sort of a balance between those two groups. And then I'll let Charlie speak for himself.
Yeah, I was just going to say to that as well. Fran, or the president, has, to my understanding, the president can seat that committee however they please. However, Fran has a very open approach to, I believe she went to the presidents of Los Angeles, New York, the mids and the small locals, and said, we want representation from all the locals. We want to make sure all the member categories are covered. We want to make sure that we have experts in this room that are either worked as minors or, in my case, has 2 children that are minors that perform. And we want to have stunt coordinator representative in the room. And we want to have people that just have every single experience so that we make sure nobody is left behind. Background performers, principal performers, high profile beginner. And so, yeah, they're all there. And I happened to get there because I think I got there because I'm an oddity in that I brought things to the wages and working conditions process that nobody even knew was in our contract, I believe. And they found that fascinating that I had dug up a lot of stuff that had been stagnant for too long. And I think people were just curious what I could bring to the table with my understanding and expertise of the contracts. Not that I'm the smartest person, but just that I think I had a unique perspective of having looked at it and studied it for a long time.
The translation on that, Sam, is Charlie got in because of his kids. Let's just get that straight.
Yeah.
Aside from Aside from being very bright and also quite the historian and archivist of our union. So Charlie does have some very, very unique skills.
That's awesome. Okay, great. So I think that is just a great jumping off point for us to know who is in these rooms. And can you now tell us how that process worked? Because on the picket lines, everyone's like, well, the negotiating committee is meeting. So in my head, I picture like a Succession style boardroom and all these chairs and a bunch of folders and everyone sitting there in like their suits and ties and whatevers. So can you actually bring us down to like when they say the AMPTP came to the table today, what did that actually look like?
I tell you what, Charlie, how about you take what we call the Cheesecake Factory and I'll take the second floor. You take the first half and I'll take the second half.
All right. So when this all kicked off, the AMPTP building, for those that may not know, is at the Sherman Oaks Galleria in Los Angeles.
Oh my God. No way.
Yeah, it's at the mall.
That's why we call it the Cheesecake Factory.
Wait, that's the Cheesecake Factory where my husband and I had our first date.
Oh, wow.
So we can blame you from now on. There we go.
100%. It's great. It's terrible. I love it.
As soon as you park there and you're walking toward the movie theater, toward the Cheesecake Factory, etc., you'll notice just to your immediate right is some unmarked door in a building, a big building. That's it. They don't have a sign. They don't have anything other than, a security glass door that they don't want people going in because, yeah, it's the AMPTP.
That's it.
Everybody's favorite people. So we would go there every single day that we had any sort of committee meetings or any cross-table communication. And as soon as you walk in the room, you check in with security, and then we would be taken into our committee room where it's all the SAG-AFTRA people, tables everywhere, big screens that we could Zoom and communicate and share with other people that couldn't make it to the meetings from around the country. To answer your question, we would have our committee meetings in there. And then when we were what's considered across the table, we would go into a different room across the hall. And there were how many, Kevin? Would you say like 30 or so people?
Yeah, I would say 35 to 40. It's 3 or 4 long rows with a center table. It's set up very sterile, but also kind of confrontational, quite frankly. It's pretty funny, but it's a very stale room.
Very stale. And then it's a bunch of us, actors and our lawyers on one side. And on the other side are a bunch of number crunchers at their computers. And it actually took, Kevin, I don't know if you realized this from doing it before. It took me several weeks to realize why they're all typing. I thought they were just working and like punching in numbers. No. They're taking notes, every single team, because it's like Sony's over there, Netflix is over there, Amazon, Apple, they're all like, we don't trust a note taker, so we're going to take our own notes of it. So they all have their own recording of everything that's being said. And I imagine they're doing some maths as well, but like, it's just really, really fascinating to hear as Carol in the center chair and Duncan in the center chair and Fran and Ray and all of them are in the middle. They're just constantly typing away and we're just sitting there listening until we go back to our committee room and discuss.
Because one of the most important things to remember, Sam, is these people do not like each other, except when they sit across the table from us. They are competitors, and your audience and our community needs to not forget that. these guys are taking notes. And to me, Charlie, one of the funniest things was to watch one studio from one end of the table start to ask a question of us, and then watch the other people at the other end of the table kind of lean down, and the person looks down the table to make sure they're asking the question just right, so they don't give away too much information to their competitors on their side of the table about what they're thinking. It is hysterical.
Wow. Okay. I didn't even think about that aspect, that everyone's, it's like the waiting room for a callback. Everyone's trying to get their spot.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
That's wild.
And then we go back into our caucus room, and we were sat in a square with a Zoom TV monitor for all the people around the country who weren't there.
I think the only thing missing from this setup is to understand there's a third part, a really, really, really important third part. And that's what's called sidebar. And it's where we'll have that main room where both parties, everybody's in the room. But there is some actual explain yourself periods of time. And it's where Duncan and Ray, our center chair and Ray, will go across from Carol and Tracy. They will in sidebar discuss the provisions, why that wouldn't work for us, why we need this. And they will sort of hash it out and explain themselves to each other. And then from that, Ray will come back and give a presentation of all his notes, so that we know exactly what was said, what their position is, why they don't want meal penalties, why they think that child performers that are under the age of 14 shouldn't have compensation for their pension plans, things like that. That's whenever they'll tell us those positions. So that's for the committee to hear on its own in a room, and for us to either laugh or bang the desk or talk about, maybe what we understand and how to get around stuff. So I just wanted you to know that part as well.
Sam, as I pick up for the second part, so that's what happened from June 7th to when we went on strike in July 13th. That's why I said, Charlie, take the first half and I'll take the second half, because in the second half, when we came back in October 1, the one thing that occurred in that room across the table, what we would call the main meeting room in the first half, we also gave lots of presentations. And this is part of the point for us that I think for your audience, Sam, we really want people to understand that we sit singers, dancers. We had sample presentations from them about how difficult cell tapes are. We had conversations about performance capture and motion capture by our experts. We had conversations with regards to AI. We had conversations with people with disabilities. We did, I think, 8 to 10 presentations of what we would call specific protected areas of our performance contract. That happened in the first half. When we came back to the table on October 1, we forced them to come to us. And we were in the SAG-AFTRA headquarters on Wilshire. And we're on the second floor, which is basically a kind of a meeting cafeteria kind of room where, again, we had a dais and we had more long tables. We weren't in a box. And that's the period of time when the CEOs actually came to SAG-AFTRA. And once again, we did a small emissary group where there were the first vice president and Duncan and Ray. There was about 6 and 6, the 4 CEOs and Carol and one other person. So we got a sidebar download every single time they went in the room. But once again, we did also, in front of the CEOs, some of our individual people on some specific conversations, once again, went in and sat across from the CEOs, Bob and David and Ted and Donna, and actually had to represent again to them some of the specificities about the difficulty of some of these areas that are parts of our proposal package. So in the meantime, we're sitting in there and some people are discussing things. Some people are sitting outside. Some people are going through contracts. Unfortunately, there's a lot of eating, which is not necessarily good for some of us, but that's how the second half went.
It's stress eating.
Yeah, I can imagine it was like a lot of pizza.
Yeah, so that's basically how the two setups went in this particular negotiation.
And when you say presentations, who puts those together?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I wanted to add to what Kevin said about the presentation is we have presentations even before negotiations, because the whole process gets kicked off sort of by W&W's, the wages and working conditions process. And that goes back all the way to November. A year ago, we were, all in rooms pitching what we wanted to change and making our case for what we wanted to see either taken from or added to the contract, or even just an exploration of can we have consultations about this or that, which we could have introduced as side letters. And so those presentations, there were presentations that even came out of W&W's in our landmark presentation that the members got over. I think they did 3 or 4 of them for us. And that was even prior to negotiations. Those were for the members, either for the whole membership or it was just members that made it to plenary. So we had whole landscape presentations even before we went into negotiations, but I forget what the second
That's
part
okay.
was.
And what comes out of that, Sam, is there was basically what we get in plenary once the committee is seated. That's the process that happens before we actually go into the negotiation timeframe. We had 257-ish items in a matrix. That's extraordinary when you consider just last negotiation. I think our package totaled 23. So what you have to wind up doing is exactly. So it's very difficult to build this package. And this was the largest package in the history of SAG-AFTRA for sure. And so when you talk about the actual sidebars that we did for the AMPTP and for the CEOs, Ray and Duncan, and sometimes I think occasionally Fran, but most of the time just Ray and Duncan, they would sit with the individual who was going to be giving the specific expertise presentation and just probably kind of do a sort of a mock go over and run through of how that was going to go, since they were going to be sitting across from, 4 fairly intimidating people with the CEOs.
I didn't even remember it being that many proposals, but I do remember that Duncan said he jokes about this now, but like in the time, it's very like, how are they going to react to this? But he said when they drop the proposals, it like lands with a thud. It was just so heavy.
Because technically we had about, I don't want to say the exact amount because it was between 43 and 50. I'll just say that. But technically, Sam, it really wasn't, because our staff did a tremendous job of basically burying 2 to 3 items a number. So it was probably closer to 150. So we had to kind of whittle down from 257 to that, but they made it look like 40 something. But it was, I can tell you from my previous negotiations, a comparison between 3 years ago and the comparison of what we gave them this time was extraordinary.
That's outstanding. Oh God, those W&W meetings feel like they were 1,000 years ago and also yesterday. Okay, so we're in the negotiation process. Did you go subject by subject when you were across the table? And then did you go back to the room and discuss those exact points? Because there's so many areas that things are changed and updated that I can't imagine how you could even pinpoint one topic at a time in a room in a timely fashion.
I have 2 binders that thick of all the documents, and that's not even everything that was necessarily downloaded. The answer to your question is no. We do not go there. They are numbered 1 through blah, right? But some of them you do a combination, and I want Charlie to definitely give his feeling about how this went. One of the things you try to do is obviously you try to get movement as quickly as you can in a negotiation. How quickly can we reach what is called a TA, tentative agreement, on individual things? Some things are not difficult. Some things you wind up holding on. And what will happen is we talk through some things and we have initial discussions, and there is some sort of a counter made, be the counter made by us or the counter made by them. Then you sort of begin the process of having to address the counters before either it's a stalemate and just a mutual hold or a hold on one side, and you have to move on to something else. But I would also love to hear Charlie add characterization to that process.
Yeah. What's interesting about, I mentioned earlier, the people that are in the negotiating committee. And to be clear, there's, 34 members, 17 are voting, 17 alternates. And then we have a handful of bullpen with expertise on different areas such as sexual harassment prevention and AI, minors. But when topics come up, when paragraphs come up, there really are people that are like, that's mine. That's mine. I know this. I champion it. I understand how this works. And they really push for and advocate for the room to understand what's at stake for any change and why that provision is important. And I think what's really unique, it's being my first time, and Kevin, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, what made this so different than other negotiations of the past was everybody in the room seemed to go, okay, if they want it, then let's do it. Unanimous. We're in support of that change. We're in support of keeping that or getting rid of that, whatever it was. And that was just so awesome. It gave us so much power. And we were just such a unified group the entire process because of that trust in the person that was spearheading or leading or even helping to push the conversation, whatever the subject matter was.
Very true.
So then how do we wind up with a tentative agreement? Because we have all of these things, some things you might have agreed on early, and then you have to go back to negotiating when they walked away from the table. How do we end up with this final document?
Well, let me make sure that I say, Sam, that we walked away from the table. We were
there we go. Sorry. Yeah, that's important. I like that.
We were the ones, which again, I still to this moment, and hopefully Charlie finds this as humorous as I did. I still wish we had a camera on the moment that happened, and just a few words and things that led up to the moment of this really interesting moment of silence. I still think that there was one particular person who was the first person to stand up, but when it happened, Sam, literally someone on the second row stood up and all of us just went, this is about 11:40 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th of July. And then everyone just went, oh, okay, we're leaving. And no one said a word. And everyone from the SAG-AFTRA side stood up and filed out. But when that happens, that's because you have reached, obviously, a stalemate. You've reached a place where there's enough that is immovable. There's enough in which either side is going to hold to, whether it's AI or whether it was the, revenue share or whether it was 7 other things. It didn't make any difference. We had already discussed in our caucus where we were at, and the room, as Charlie would say, we would internally vote about where we were at. And so you just reach a place in which you go, and you don't ever want to do it. Remember, SAG hasn't gone on strike in a long, long time with this contract. And so it does start becoming fairly obvious when you're a week or 10 days out from this. And remember, we gave them a 12-day extension. So when we hit 6/30, which is when our contract sunset, and we gave them another 12 days, and essentially I would characterize it as they seemed to just kind of waste 6 of those days, which is around the July 4th holiday, it began to get somewhat apparent that we were headed to this moment. And so it wasn't as if it was a shock. And the last thing I want to say before Charlie begins to go further beyond this about how we arrive at an agreement, there were some reports out there that there was cheering and elation when we got back over to our side after this, and that is completely false. But no one was cheering. We all knew what we had just signed up for and what we just put our entire membership in the face of. Well, some people obviously very glad that we chose to do that. I was one of them, but it wasn't something where people were jumping up and down and cheering at that moment close to midnight. But not at all.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility to make a choice for a whole group like that. I mean, everything you guys did was a lot of responsibility for a whole group. So I can't imagine that these decisions were at all taken lightly.
So Charlie, how'd we get a deal?
Well, let me just go back and I'll just flesh a little bit more out. And that is that, Kevin's right. I mean, we all saw the writing on the wall, as the days got closer and closer, because so you're aware, they would just ignore whole sections. We would have a tentative agreement on the animal monitoring changes, and then we'd have a tentative agreement on formal wear for background performers getting a 50% raise. But then we'd have like a whole page of like producers reject, union to withdraw, like where they're making recommendations for us to withdraw. And then ones where they're just like, nope, we're not going to even talk about it. And we'll get back to you on AI. We'll get back to you eventually on revenue share. Like they just ignored them. I shouldn't say ignore them because they were probably doing work behind the scenes, but maybe I'm being too generous. Maybe they just straight up were like, we're just going to write out the clock on this. But that said, when you come down to like 3 days left, 2 days left, and we haven't even discussed AI in like 4 days, we know we're not going to get there. And to give you an idea of how far away we were looking where we are now back in time, our AI provisions were 5 pages long. Now they are 17 or 19 pages long. That's how far we've come since then. They wanted so much. So basically we were so sure that they weren't going to surprise us with everything that we wanted. We went into that room, what was it, Kevin, at like 11:40 or so, and they handed us t-shirts right before we went in. They were like, hey, put these on. And our side, SAG-AFTRA, they were like, here's some t-shirts. And we go in with SAG-AFTRA strong t-shirts, all of us in there to that room, hoping Carol would say, okay, all right, fine. Here's the AI stuff, whatever you guys need. But realistically knowing that's not going to happen. And I think she even made a comment as we were coming in, like, what is it, free t-shirt night? And
she's not particularly funny. She's not really very funny.
Her fake Twitter is very funny.
It is funny. Yes, you're correct. And we had after 6 weeks, almost on the way to 7 weeks, I think we still had 16 or 17 items that were on hold when we went on strike. And two of those were revenue share and AI, which were number one and number two of the entire contract. People would ask me, because we couldn't get very specific when we first went on strike, Sam, people would ask me, well, how far apart are we? And the best answer I could give anyone was Grand Canyon.
So yeah, it really was I think we all were aware, unless they had an ace up their sleeve, that they were like, all right, we're just kidding. We were solving it all over here and you got it, which I don't think was realistic, but I didn't have the experience to know that. So I held hope, but I didn't see it either. So we all went into that room at 11:40-ish and knew that we'd be going on strike.
Wow. And I think it's important to emphasize too, everyone's a volunteer. Apart from the SAG staff, everyone is giving their time. Am I correct? Like you guys are just choosing to be there with families and jobs and everything going on. And you're at the Sherman Oaks Galleria at midnight on a weekday. Nobody wants to be there.
You are correct. Our union is a bifurcation structure in which staff is one half and elected leadership is the other. And from Fran all the way down to the newest person on a volunteer committee, every single member is a volunteer.
So I'll just go a step further to say that, while we're fortunate enough to be in LA, everybody else, for the most part, flew in and put their lives on hold. What about, I forget what the number is, 9 members maybe from New York flew in. We have a representative from Washington Mid-Atlantic. We have several representatives from Atlanta, from the Atlanta local. I mean, they're coming in from all over the United States and pushing pause on their jobs, their families, their lives to live in a hotel and deal with the stress that is this negotiation, not knowing it would lead to a strike and let alone 118 days. But that's the sacrifice that they made. So they're amazing that they were willing to do all that for us. So I think they get an extra gold star in my book.
Yeah. Chicago, Dallas, New England, and Nashville as well.
Thank you.
Wow. Outstanding. And so let's fast forward to where things got good. 118 days later.
It wasn't smooth. It wasn't smooth.
I don't doubt it. What was different about this time?
Ooh. Yeah. Well, I think between October 1st and November 8th, especially the last 3 weeks, I think again, having done this before, this was 3 times as difficult based on just the nature of the package, the nature of the issues, and the last 3 weeks leading up to November 8th were absolutely brutal, especially the last 2. I don't know how much sleep I got, but it was not a lot. I think there was a period of time where we went through 4 or 5 out of 6 or 7 days that we had between 7 and 10 or 11 hour days back to back to back. And it strains you, but that's also the funny part, Sam. That's also part of their strategy. That is part of their strategy. I call it the taffy machine. You just keep stretching and pulling things apart, and you have to make hard decisions. You have to make compromises you don't want. You have to let things go that you don't want, and this causes harder conversation in the room, and you keep pushing, and you wonder if we're going to walk out again. You wonder all the other strategy points of what we could or could not do. And while it becomes difficult, this group, despite vastly different interests, sometimes vastly different ideologies and vastly different histories in the career, managed to find a way to stay together and get through it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think another group of unsung heroes in this whole story, when we all settled down, or at any given point in time, people will realize, but really the staff are the first people there, sometimes hours before the volunteers even show up, the negotiating committee. And they are there deep into the night, early morning, working on drafting or coming up with ideas or stress testing the math on some new formula that they came up with because the last 2 iterations, the producers aren't buying. So they need the companies aren't buying. So they need to come up with a new idea. And, sometimes we're out of there at 10, 11 o'clock at night and they're still working. And they're going to be meeting first thing in the morning. And so it doesn't go unnoticed that while we were fighting for rest period violations, that they would have been preaching a rest period violation every single time that we had a late day or early morning. So they did so much work. And I think we should all be so grateful for what they did, because I always say, like, if writers were supposed to write the contract, or if actors were supposed to write the contract, we would have been hosed. I can't write this contract. They do a fantastic job. So
I speak a lot sometimes in analogies and metaphors, and I would say it this way, Sam, and I only say this because I'm going to try and render a guess, not an assumption, but a guess, that this will really sink in with you and hopefully some of your listeners, in that you are going on a really cool or special trip, but because of where you may be going, you cannot actually check luggage, and you have to find a way to only take a carry-on and one personal item for maybe 5 or 6 days. We all know that this winds up leaving you in a place where you're angsting and struggling over what can make it into your luggage and what can't. And there's always going to be stuff that just can't make it in, and you're just hoping that it winds up being something you can be okay with on your trip. Now, that's a very light metaphor, but that's what those last 2 weeks, last 7 days, and literally in this negotiation, the last 48 and 24 hours were like for this negotiating committee.
So we have some packed suitcases, and right now we're voting on our carry-ons, and I'm not going to pretend like everyone knows who's listening to this. I'm so glad people are listening. I hope with an open mind, because people came out swinging. I think there was a moment we got off strike and everyone was like, we did it. We're incredible. We're amazing. And then information came out and a lot of people thought we didn't get every single thing we wanted. Why was I on strike for 118 days? So can we speak to that general thought process? Because I know a lot of us have not been in negotiations before. A lot of us are only children, or perhaps we've never had to, deal with this before. But how do you guys feel about that? And what would you like people to know about the process that got us here?
Yeah, I don't know. This is my habit always to go back because I think of something. So I just want to say before we go into the contract or the summary coming out, I just want to say that another group of heroes in this story are the captains, the volunteers that kept up the spirit, kept showing up in numbers, the members that walked the lines day after day, the countless number of people that would picket or leaflet and whatever your local was, showing the solidarity, because understand that there were always times that we were in the room wondering, is this it? Are we at the point where the members, the numbers are getting slower on the line, or I'm not getting as many messages of support as long as it takes. I'm not getting that as much as I was in week 1 or whatever. No, they kept going. It's just there were ups and downs and whatnot, but we did hit several walls where we're I think this might be it. And Kevin, if we had stopped at several of those moments, we would have gotten nowhere near what we got. We had several moments that we were I don't know, guys. I think this last offer from them this might be it. And we just kept pushing and we kept seeing the videos from the lines or sharing the messages with Fran or they would be live on Zoom. Francis would be live on Zoom, be like, guys, I'm walking the line. Look at this. Look at these people. We just kept going. And so I just want to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't say they were so inspiring and they had everything to do with the success. And I stress that because people kept asking, what does this really do? Is Zaslav seeing me walk in front of Warner Brothers? I don't think so. And it wasn't that at all. It wasn't that at all. So yeah, Kevin, I teed that up for you. Now you take it.
Thanks, man. I tell you what, Sam, I'm gonna do a short characterization and then I will hand it over to Charlie to initiate some specifics. But I'm going to share it this way, and I'm trying to make sure I couch this because I am certainly older than you, Sam, and I have been doing this business for a long, long time, and I have been a part of other negotiations and just watched an evolution since the early 90s to today. And I would say this, especially in light of sort of our last several negotiation cycles, if it were not for AI, and it's an important distinction to me in how this contract, I believe, should be looked at and also revered and however someone wants to vote. But if you took AI out of the conversation, I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying if you did, what we achieved in this contract would be in any year preceding, be that 08, 09, 11, 14, 17, 20, there would be a celebration going down the street for all of the things that we actually achieved, whether that's breaking the pattern on minimums finally for the first time since that pattern was established, whether it's moving pension caps for the first time in 43 years, having brought high budget AVOD terms up to equal high budget SVOD terms when ad supported video and streaming is about to explode, whether it's the 11% we got in background. You could pick a number of things in this massive, massive package. And no matter what you think of the current success fund that we have versus 2% of revenue share and what that's going to eventually become, nonetheless, it was a blank piece of paper and now something is there. I do think it's a massive success in that way. And that really isn't being discussed a lot. It is being overshadowed. Yet I understand it because AI scares the living hell out of everybody. And I completely get that. But to me, AI is a long sort of siloed conversation. But I think if you take a moment and look at how severely difficult this negotiation was, it's pretty extraordinary for all the things that we have gotten, aside from also the AI provisions we have, and yet all the controversy over that. Mr. Bodin, I've teed that up for you, sir.
What did you tee up for me?
Now to be specific, son, on why AI is a challenge and sort of dwarfing the conversation to all the other amazing stuff that we got in this negotiation.
Yeah, no. And by the way, just to be clear, I said what I said because I thought you just did a great job wrapping it up. So I didn't think that there was much I could contribute to.
See what he does, Sam? He's trying to get out of this. He's trying to get out of it.
This is really nice. To be honest, I don't want to talk about AI at all, but I have to.
I just lower my seat. Lower my seat.
Oh no, that's cool. We do not have to at all. But I do think.
No, we have to.
Yeah, I know. But Charlie couches some of it in a very simple way so nicely that I will let the dulcet tones of Mr. Bodin have that.
Yeah, I mean, the AI conversation obviously is everybody's concerned about it, and rightfully so, about it being an existential threat to our art, our craft, our business, our livelihood, let alone the industry that we all love so much. And so we had to obviously get as much as we possibly could in this contract. We have 17 pages of AI containment that we didn't have before, along with, I mean, the MOA is going to be, I think Duncan said last night, the MOA is going to be some 130 pages, where past MOAs have been somewhere between 40 and 70 pages. So the AI section, just in the summary, I was just looking at it. If you take out the AI, we still have an additional 11 pages just in the summary. And to put that in context, the Writers Guild summary, just their summary was on a one sheet. So the Writers Guild compared to ours is like, we got such an awesome contract that, I understand the AI conversation. I'm just, my response immediately is just to what we got that wasn't even AI. Let's just talk about the stuff that we got, and it's huge.
Part of the AI difficulty is just simply the word unknown. And also there are many, many, many people in this profession who either themselves are involved with, let's say, the interactive media agreement, which is currently being negotiated, and they're involved in gaming, or they have a friend who works in AI. I certainly know some people who work in the AI field. We had two very, very sharp gentlemen amongst our committee who assisted in that area. And there is nothing about what AI is and the provisions that we have that you can't sit around and come up with the worstest case scenario ever and be fearful of that. Every single one of us understands that. However, I'm going to say this quickly and then let Mr. Bodin jump in off of what I'm about to say. However, I am going to say this from a legal standpoint. If you don't have anything codified in a contract, then basically anything is possible. And while I understand where Ms. Bateman is coming from, that there simply shouldn't be any and it should be human only. First of all, I'm an idealist, but I'm a pragmatic idealist, and that's not pragmatic or logical in a lot of ways. But I'm just going to give you a scenario in that understand without putting, and we have some amazing provisions in this AI. If it was left to be a blank page, I want everyone to understand that they have been scanning people in foreign productions for the last 4 or 5 years. And over there, they don't have unions to protect them. So a lot of U.S. companies already have a ton of digital scans that they could actually begin to populate background with and a bunch of other things. And where there is no union, above and beyond the background numbers that are a part of our contract, which we saved in this negotiation. And it would be the immediate slow end to some of this. And also, if we had pushed, let's say, for an extra 3 or 4 months purely on trying to make it be human only, then we also have to understand that the stars could branch off and go work in right to work states. And again, we would be in a really difficult position about slowly splitting this union. So there are also some dangerous scenarios that could have happened on the other side without working to get the amazing provisions that we currently have in this contract, albeit many things that have people concerned. But one of the things that obviously is going to happen is people break laws every day, and there are going to be breaches. And that's why we simply have to become frostier professionals and file claims and then slowly have arbitration and begin to, solidify all the legal things around what we have done. And to jump off of that, I turn that over to Mr. Bodin. Fire away. Add some sauce to that, brother.
Yeah, Sam, I don't know if you have a question on that, but I will say, just to back up what Kevin said, we're all going to become experts in filing claims very soon.
Yeah.
We have to. I mean, let me put it to you this way. The union does not let you know. I'm just giving you a hypothetical. The union doesn't tell you, hey, your 2004 episode of Cold Case just ran in Switzerland 6 months ago, and we haven't received a check for it. Do you want to file a claim? You have to know. You have to get a call from your cousin who lives in Switzerland and says, hey, 6 months ago, your episode of Cold Case from 2004 aired. Have you been paid yet? Because otherwise you should file a claim with SAG. That's what we have to do. And so the union, we are our own police. The union is the lawyers that pursue the money that we're owed. So, and get us the contracts to get us the money. And so in this case now regarding AI, until technology is created, and I'm sure it's coming fast, if it's not already here, it'll be more affordable as the days go by to chase down our likenesses being used. We're going to have to monitor our content more than we've ever watched it before. I mean, every show that you did a scan for, you need to make sure that you don't show up in the background. You need to make sure that you don't, have additional scenes added. We're going to have to be on top of our careers like never before and be very familiar with the claims process.
And also, Sam, I have to toss this in there because this is something that we think about, all the ways that something can be used, because it is natural as human beings to think about almost anything in life from our disposition first, as opposed to someone else's disposition. Yet we have to understand from the other side. Let's pretend for just a second, Sam, that you are going to do a 3-day co-star, which is a bit of a rarity, but you got a 3-day co-star. And somebody says, okay, well, they're going to always scan me every single time I book a job. Well, let's break that down. First of all, the amount of time it takes to actually properly scan someone to use to create a broadcast quality digital replica of you. And because it's, it was going to be a rainy scene or something, they decide they want to work you 2 days and they want to use your digital replica for 1 day. First of all, that's still something you get paid for. But let's bear in mind that at the time, right now, this will change, of course, but right now it costs $10,000 to $20,000 to create a proper digital replica to look as good as Sam Valentine. And the belief that they're discussing, they would never do it. They're not going to spend 10, 20 grand just to skip a day of you, even if you were making $1,500 a day and not just scale. So we have to bear in mind there is a cost factor at the time, which is going to come down. But at the moment, it is going to give us time to begin to start charting this, and hopefully eventually sooner than later have watermark digital scans and lots of other ways to track exactly what Charlie just said.
Yeah. The word that you used too that really caught my ear was containment, because this is totally uncharted territory. And I understand the fear. I totally do. I'm a person who lives on the internet. I'm constantly afraid of people making fakes of myself in the world. I've already been scraped from the internet by OpenAI, probably. I've probably already been scraped. I'm on every platform. I'm doing everything at all the time. So the AI already is there. And I can't reverse that. And I think that that's everyone's fear, is that like once we fall down this rabbit hole, we can't reverse it. And I think that there's no reversing where we are now. This is where we are, in my opinion. But what we can do is mitigate everything right now and start to build containment, which you said. And I loved that word, because that to me feels like what this contract is we've never had rules on AI. I was on a show once where they were like, maybe we'll put her also, like, maybe we'll edit her later. And they didn't end up actually scanning me, but they thought about it. And at the time, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, I would just go over and they would take a bunch of pictures and do X, Y, and Z. And I would have been a part of that without even knowing it, which I know so many people have been. But I think that this is the steps that, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are the initial steps we have to take where we are in order to figure this out in the future.
If we don't do it, Sam, it still is going to occur without us putting these provisions. As Charlie just said, it went from 5 pages to 17, whatever it is now, and the full MOA, aside from the arguments about that, which the MOA has never been actually put out before the vote before, which doesn't mean it can't be. And I think what's great is the membership has been pushing for that. And I believe that our leadership is going to actually accomplish getting the full MOA out before. But we also can't make a mistake on a word. So there's a reason why that drafting takes a little bit of time from the national board vote.
Yeah, I really want to highlight that because I think that's a lot of people. I've seen a lot of comments on Instagram
well, Sam,
of people saying things like, release the contract. And I'm like, have you read our current contract? Because I haven't.
It's 1,200 pages long. Also, I would always ask people, how many contracts have you voted on before in your career and you've never concerned yourself with it? That doesn't mean you shouldn't concern yourself with this one. I'm not saying it that way. Totally. Kevin is a person who, like Charlie said about the strike captains, because I'm the LA organizing chair, so I was out on the lines all over the whole city all the time. I love. I don't know how many loves that is, but I love the fact that our members are screaming and shouting. I'm all for it. I'd like to see a little less emotion. I'd like to see a little more intellect. But I'm fine if we push to get the MOA out for the first time in history. Cool. Don't look at it because it's not out as if we're hiding something. It's never been put out before. So setting that aside, I do want to make sure that when we look at AI and we understand what we are staring at, the AMPTP will say to you, Sam, and we have discussed this because you asked about the negotiation process. When you present a proposal to them, that seems like, if you're sitting on their side, it seems like a complaint or a failing by them or a proposal that arises out of some sort of sticking point that's happened to members. The first thing the AMPTP is going to ask you for is complaint claim filing evidence. They want to know how many members in the last 3 years have complained and bitched about this thing that we're supposedly putting a proposal on, like whether it's rest periods or late fees or whatever it may be. They want to see, and if we don't have evidence, then they'll just not listen. So to Charlie's point,
that's huge for people to know.
Yeah,
that's huge. I don't think people know that. I don't think they do.
No. And so to Charlie's point, not only becoming claim experts because AI is going to be so dicey, but also from the standpoint, the more we file them, the more evidence we have. And eventually we both know there is going to be a legal case. There is going to be a Scarlett Johansson, Sarah Silverman kind of thing that's going to come down, and it's going to set the table for how much money some studio or some company can lose by trying to screw an actor over. So evidence is a huge part of the future of AI and our careers.
And just so everyone knows, this is part of what your dues go to, is to paying the SAG staff who do all of these amazing things like writing these contracts, showing up in these rooms and taking our claims and compiling them for the next time we do this. So it all is cyclical. And I think something I do want to designate about what you said in terms of putting the full MOA contract out is that I've seen that too. Why would we they're hiding something, but it is your guys' contract too. You're also actors who were affected by all of this. So why would you hide something from us because it's yours also? That, I want to point out that fallacy because it absolutely makes no sense. Why would Charlie, if you have 2 kids and they're minors and they're working in this business, why would you want them to be dealing with some secret AI clause that we're not going to understand? You don't. There's no way.
If I understand it best, I would just put it this way. One of the biggest achievements that we got in this contract regarding AI is the seeking of consent for a performer before their digital replica can be used in any sort of way. And so to that case, we are saying that the digital replica cannot be used in any way, shape, or form unless the performer in advance, minimum of 48 hours, has been told before they're scanned, has been told what their digital replica is going to be due in detail. So not just you're in a car, but what are you doing in that car? Explain yourself. At that point, the performer has informed consent. They can decide yes or no, I want my digital replica to be used. So when we're at one side of our mouth saying that we want to seek consent and as much information in advance before you say yes or no, you can do that. On the other side, we're saying, hey, by the way, sign the summary, vote yes on it, and we're only going to give you the summary. So that, I believe, is the other party's way of thinking. It's give us the full information so that we can make an educated choice. The case is obvious in that we've never done it that way. We didn't anticipate that there would be this big backlash of give us all the details now. I mean, if I had to theorize, if we had given them just the MOA, I imagine there would be a big campaign of, who the hell do you think we are? We're not lawyers. I have to hire a lawyer to tell me what this MOA says. Give us the summary now. That's very likely what would probably be happening. Now, that said, I just looked it up earlier today in the 2014 contract. I'm going to go off my memory here, so I may get some of it wrong, but the 2014 contract was ratified by the membership on August 22nd, I believe, was when it was ratified. So prior to that, the summary had been out and the membership ratified it on the 22nd. I think it was like 30 days of ratification. The MOA wasn't complete until September 21st or September 14th. I mean, it took that long from when the summary came out to even after ratification. It's a process. It's a legal process that takes time. So I guess that the best way to wrap this up is to let you know that, again, Duncan reiterated last night to the informative meeting that's currently on YouTube that you can watch. He says that they're almost done with it. It's going to be out to the members, the full MOA for AI specifically, so that the members know what's in there and they can take the time. There's still time. There's December 5th is the deadline. So over 2 weeks left to vote.
Correct.
So it'll be out for people to study it.
Can you just explain real quick why it did work like that in the past? Why the deal points came out, we had a tentative agreement, and then the MOA was done? Like, is there logistical reasons why that has always been like that? Because it's faster?
Yeah, well, mine is still based on conjecture and just my time around the union in this business. But I honestly do believe, Sam, it is as simple as sort of what Charlie just said. When you summarize legalese to the degree with which we have to summarize legalese for people to at least understand the basic fences of what someone of any provision that we have or any covenant that's been created in a negotiation process, it's not a matter of thinking that somehow less is best, or less is more. It's just less is simply less confusing, because a lot of legal jargon can just simply not feel redundant, but can pretty much overwhelm somebody who might be a layperson with regards to legal language. So that is my best guess. And also just because you just don't want to get your drafting wrong, because you cannot make a mistake on one word. And when it comes to AI, we sure can't make a mistake on one word. I personally just want to say one last thing, because I know we're going to run out of time soon, about something I have not heard a lot of people talk about, but I think it actually matters a great deal in terms of AI. And that is this. Let us not forget, AI applies to this entire business, just like it's being used around the world. And even though we are 2.5 years away from our next cycle on this particular contract, we have a commercial contract negotiation that's going to come up in the spring of 25. And so the reality is, it's not as though AI doesn't apply to the commercial performers and commercial productions as well. So we're going to have an opportunity to not only take what we've done with AI now and also look at what we learned between now and that time for commercials, but then also apply a lot of this to that commercial negotiation and improve it for them. And then we can also then use that and the history and evidence we have from that going towards ours in 2026. So there's even going to be a checkpoint for some of what we've gotten now when we actually sit down to go through the commercial.
Well, think about it. Even in the IMA, in the Interactive Media Agreement right now, they specifically, there were some of our experts were like, just so you know, like, this is how that affects this space. Keep that in mind. Maybe we should change this a little bit so that we can use it as an advantage over here. And so, I mean, my understanding in regards to the IMA is that there's a lot of them holding on their positions, both sides, because they wanted to see how this contract would pan out. What were our gains? What were we able to achieve? Because some of the partners that are in the negotiations for the Interactive Media Agreement for video games are Sony, and Sony's like in our negotiation for TV theatrical as well. And I believe Disney as well. So it's like there's some crossover. And so, yeah, they're just yes-anding what Kevin said.
Yeah. I mean, that's a bunch of actors just yes-anding each other no matter what. Personally, this conversation of peeling back this curtain, this helps me a lot to just understand and be able to speak to other people about it. And at this moment in time, I'm voting yes for the contract. I'm very excited. I'm also thrilled not to have to do a self-tape on the weekend. Can't wait till that extends to commercials one day. But I am very excited. I know. One day I'm going to push for that in the spring of 25. But I just want to say a collective huge one. Thank you for your time today, guys. And two, thank you for your time over the past year. Because like we said, W&W started forever ago. You had to attend at least 5 of them to qualify to go to the final round of WWs. And that was a whole nother round of meeting. And then you guys have been in pre-meetings before the meetings. And then you've been in meetings. And that's a lot of time at the Cheesecake Factory. And then that's a lot of time at the SAG-AFTRA building, which is under construction. So it's like not exactly the funnest place to be. And you burdened a lot of the responsibility for this union. And I, for one, speak for myself, and I know several other people when I say I feel very taken care of. So thank you very much for speaking for all of us. And I'm very excited about what the future holds. So thank you guys so much for this.
Thank you, Shannon. That's so kind of you to say. I know a lot of people, made some real sacrifices. Let me just give a shout out then to my wife and my kids for being so patient, because they were extremely patient. My kids, luckily the strike ended right about the time my kids started asking me, I want to say dad, but I'm not sure if that's who you are anymore.
And Sam, just to add to your hopeful joy, I did just actually get a large audition for a Netflix show this week. And I have to tell you that not only did they limit it to 4 pages, and not only did they give me 72 hours, the breakdown was actually, and now granted, it's a big Netflix show, but the breakdown was literally letter perfect to our contract language. And that is already on Monday, which is only 1 business day after the national board vote and 3 days after the initial tentative agreement. So hopefully we will start reaping some of the benefit of the labor that has been done.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.